Welcome back to another episode of Oklahoma Faces of Free Enterprise. I'm joined today by Courtney Phelps, who's the Senior Vice President for Executive Communications with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us, and welcome to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Well, we're glad to be here. We started this whole series off here in Washington, D.C. very deliberately. When you think about, the American experiment being tied to free enterprise, right? And what that being the engine that it really pushed our whole country forward and has turned us into the industrial superpower that we are today. The cornerstone of all that is capitalism. And one of the things we're here to do is to talk about capitalism openly for the free markets, free enterprise, and to address head on to begin with, in your own words, maybe describe capitalism, and then we're going to segue in a little bit about how some people have become confused by what capitalism is, and how in some circles it's even gotten kind of a bad name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what is capitalism? I mean, if you look at it from sort of an academic standpoint, it's an economic system. And there are a few key features. The means of production are privately owned. We have a market-based economy, so goods and services are sold for profit in competitive markets, driven by supply and demand, and there's a limited role of government. So that means that companies and individuals are really the ones driving the decisions about business and about what they'll do. Now, I would say, there's something really unique about American free enterprise. You mentioned, democracy and capitalism kind of grew up together. Next year, of course, we're celebrating the supercentennial, and not only is it the 250th birthday of our democracy, it's also the 250th anniversary of the Wealth of Nations. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that the people who came to America seeking political freedom or economic freedom, they came with this unique sense of entrepreneurship that really has driven American free enterprise to be the driver of the world's greatest, most resilient, most dynamic economy.
I couldn't agree more. So how do we get from where we were to where we are today, where it's still an incredible engine, right? But there are misconceptions about it.
Sure.
Maybe talk about that.
Yeah, we probably all saw, not too long ago, there was a Gallup poll that found that 54%, so just a slim majority of Americans, support capitalism. And that's the lowest that it's been since they started tracking it. It's down, I think, 6 points in about the last 4 years. That's pretty significant. Now, that's the word capitalism, which we know doesn't necessarily test well with people. Free enterprise is a little bit better. But I think a lot of what's happening is that we're in this sort of this moment of kind of political and economic tumult a little bit. There is a real driving desire for fairness in the country, and you see it expressed in all kinds of ways. But there's definitely, you look at the capitalist system and the ability for people to generate really, great amounts of wealth for themselves, for the markets, for others, for companies, for communities. But then there are also a lot of people who just are, they're struggling to get by, and they're having a harder time. And so they wonder, if I can't get ahead, but other people can really get ahead, is this system really working for me? Now, at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I have no doubt the Oklahoma Chamber as well, we believe that growth is how you create the opportunity. And so we want more. We want abundance. We want to grow the pie, make it bigger, so that people can have the opportunity to kind of get ahead, get a better life, provide for themselves and their families. Now, if fairness is the driver, if that's how you're setting policy, if that's kind of the main feature that you want from an economic system, you're going to take the pie you have, you're going to cut it into little pieces and pass it out evenly. That's fair. But that's not how we create the opportunity, the innovation, all of the wonderful things that free enterprise delivers that improves our lives.
To an extreme, that cutting the pie, dividing it evenly, is communism.
Yeah.
If you kind of really take it to the other side of that, and but it's a good point that you make. It's interesting reading your own literature. You talk about in the polling, it suggests there's just such an incredible distrust of government, and you're seeing that everywhere. Probably didn't need to poll anybody to find that out. It's all over the place. By extension of that, people now aren't trusting big businesses either.
Right.
Maybe speak to how we get that trust back.
Well, I think what we've seen is an erosion of trust in institutions generally. So yes, it's government, but it's also big business. We see a lot of that. Part of the driver of that is this sense of power imbalance. But we do know that people trust things that they are familiar with. Trust is always the strongest at the local level. So people might say, like, I don't like Congress, but I really like my congressman.
Right.
Or they might say, I don't like big business, but I really like my employer and the business that I work for. So when we're communicating about business or about free enterprise, it's really key to bring it down to the local, tangible level where people see how it impacts their life in an individual way. They're more inclined to trust it, more inclined to like it when they see it in their own lives versus, big B business or these kind of large-scale institutions.
So how do we do that? So in Oklahoma, the state chamber is the voice for business, big and small,
right,
corner to corner, border to border. Here in Washington, D.C., you are the voice for business at the Capitol. What have you all been doing to try to really help change perceptions that we can learn from and take back to Oklahoma?
Well, that's a great question. There's really two things that we've focused on. For the first is getting the words right, and then the second is getting the word out. So when it comes to getting the words right, we know that business has been on its back foot in the public debate for some time, and the arguments, the messages, the language that we're using in the public debate doesn't resonate with most people. That's just a fact. And so we kind of set out a couple of years ago to try and figure out, how do we fix that? How do we tell a better pro-business story? And so we actually undertook a very rigorous data-driven process that involved focus groups, stakeholder interviews, message testing to figure out how we could talk about business and free enterprise in a way that's actually going to resonate with people broadly, with the widest possible audience. And so the result of that is this playbook. And it's an actual manual that we have been sharing with partners like the Oklahoma Chamber, chambers all across the country, and a lot of our corporate partners. This has kind of really the arguments and the messages that are going to work. And so it has a little bit of, don't say this, say this. But I can tell you the kind of three key attributes for effectively messaging about business or free enterprise. The first is, good stories can't be about systems, they have to be about people. And so whenever you're talking about kind of your business, you have to bring it down to that people level and make them see how a business or a company is really impacting their lives in a personal way, right down to the community level. The next is you need to show people how they have power in the free market system. If you think about it, every day people vote with their dollars. So they tell businesses, that you're working for me or you're not, based on where I spend my money, based on where I take my business. And people have power in that equation, and they don't always realize it. So helping people understand how the markets are fundamentally responsive to people is important. And then the third, again, we touched on this, is to make it local. Even when you're talking about big businesses, if you bring it down to the local level, they're much more inclined to have a positive view of that business if you make it really local.
So make it local. That's a great segue to my next question, because there is a divide, favorably, unfavorable, on the perception of big business versus small business.
Right.
You hate the big business, but you love the corner coffee shop.
Right.
You hate big chain store, but you love the small boutique.
Yeah.
At the same time, that both are employers in your local area. So maybe talk about how we get the message out about how both can coexist.
That's right. Well, both should coexist. And I will say, I've talked to a lot of our small business partners and members about this, and they agree. It's not good for any business for big business to come under attack. Because first, we know that business is an ecosystem. So big businesses and small businesses, they're each other's partners and customers and contractors and clients and suppliers. If you undermine one, you undermine the other. So it's not good for small business, for big business to be attacked. The second is, it doesn't, in my view, it doesn't really matter if a business is big. What really matters is where the impact happens. No matter where a good or a service comes from, where it originates, its impact is always going to be local, because local is where people live their lives. So, I give the example of, I have there's a national chain coffee shop around the corner from my house, and I go there every day after working out, and it feels like a small business to me because I know the names of those baristas. They know my order. I know if somebody is on vacation or out sick, and it's because we're a part of the same community, and they have those jobs in my community. They enrich my life every day, even though they work for a big business.
So in that respect, the culture of the particular business matters a lot.
That's right.
You can be a big business with a personalized culture and how you impact and work with your employees, and that can definitely make an impact and a difference. You talked about 54% of Americans right now, still have a favorable view of capitalism. but only a third feel like our economy's heading in the right direction, which that moves around a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Tariffs, interest rates, inflation, everything else.
Right.
How do you see that today? Where do you think it's heading, and how do we get the confidence back?
Yeah, well, here's how I would answer that question. The free enterprise system isn't perfect. Businesses aren't perfect, and it's okay for us to acknowledge that. What's really special about the free enterprise system, and really what drives business, is a constant drive to improve and to meet consumer demand and expectations and fulfill needs and to solve problems. So the free enterprise system is the best system at getting better, and that's why it's the best system we've ever had. It's the best system anyone has ever tried. So I have great confidence in where it's going to take us. I know that we need free enterprise. We need a thriving system to create the innovations that are going to solve the problems of tomorrow.
And what should government's role be in terms of creating that framework and letting the markets roll?
Well, we think that
what shouldn't the governments be?
Shouldn't the government? The government shouldn't micromanage business decisions. Again, a cornerstone of our capitalist system is limited government. And so, yes, there are, we all want clean water and safe products and all of those things, and government has a role through kind of thoughtful, smart regulation, and businesses just want to know, what are the rules, what are the guardrails, how do I need to operate? That can be the role of business or of government. But when government reaches into business decisions and seeks to micromanage how it works, it's going to be to the detriment of growth, to the detriment of innovation and opportunity. So, we really believe in the limited role of government.
I think that's a good way to end this series. Thank you very much for your time. Again, Courtney Phelps, U.S. Chamber, a great ally and partner in our fight to find that proper balance and drive our economy forward. Thank you.